pre-dawn mist slowly yields to the first sunbeams, which kiss the peaks of the Andean mountain range, bathing the ancient stone ruins in a wash of molten gold. Below, cradled in the dense, humid embrace of the jungle, secrets lie dormant, having fueled countless legends whispered down through generations. We delve into the world of South America, where the very fabric of reality was different, a realm woven from myths, where precious metal served not as a measure of wealth, but as a sacred offering to deities. Here, the sun itself was revered as the supreme creator, and every rustle of leaves in the impenetrable forests could be the voice of an unseen spirit. This journey will lead us through three distinct facets of this astonishing worldview. We begin with Eldorado, a concept the European conquistadors utterly failed to grasp, perceiving it merely as a mythical city overflowing with untold riches. What if the true essence of this legend lay not in material opulence, but in a profound spiritual ritual? Next, we turn our gaze to Inti, the sun god, in whose name Incan emperors, proclaiming themselves his direct descendants, consecrated their boundless power. What ancient mysteries unfolded within the walls of his paramount temple, Coricancha, whose golden plates shimmered with dazzling brilliance in the reflected sunlight? And finally, we will encounter the primal power of the jungles and their enigmatic spirits, shape-shifting river dolphins that lure mortals into dark waters, flickering lights that lead unwary travelers deeper into the impenetrable tangle, and mighty entities that serve as patrons to shamans, yet are merciless to outsiders. The legend that birthed the myth of Eldorado did not spring from a thirst for conquest or riches, but from a sacred ritual, at the heart of which stood one solitary individual, adorned in gold. For the Muisca people, who inhabited the lands of modern-day Colombia, this precious metal was nothing more than a bridge, linking the mundane world of mortals with the realm of higher powers. Gold played no part in trade or commerce, and held none of the material value ascribed to it by the Europeans. Rather, it served as a language for communicating with the gods. The most paramount rite in which it played a pivotal role was the inauguration of a new ruler, a ceremony during which the chief had to affirm his divine connection and secure the favor of celestial patrons. The stage for this sacred ritual was Lake Guatavita, an almost perfectly circular body of water nestled more than 10,000 feet above sea level amidst the steep slopes of a high-altitude plateau. This hallowed site was considered a gateway to the other world, the sacred dwelling of a water goddess, to whom the tribe offered lavish gifts in exchange for fertility and prosperity. The inauguration of a new chief always transpired under the cloak of night, illuminated by the shimmering glow of hundreds of torches. On the shores of the lake, the entire tribal aristocracy and priests would gather, and the future ruler himself would first be anointed with sticky resin, then covered from head to toe in the finest gold dust. At this very moment, he ceased to be a mere mortal, becoming a precious message to the gods, whose profound significance would take centuries to unravel. In the flickering glow of the torchlight, his body was transformed, taking on an unearthly luminescence in the fire's embrace, as if cast from pure, precious metal. The future ruler ceased to be human, becoming a living embodiment of divine light, an emissary of the sun itself on earth. As the first rays of dawn pierced the morning mist, he ascended the sacred raft, artfully adorned with symbols of water and sun. He was accompanied by high priests, bearing offerings destined for the gods, intricately crafted gold amulets, weighty adornments, and figures of humans and animals. To the drawn-out sounds of ritualistic chants, the raft slowly pushed off towards the very center of the lake, where the culmination of the entire ceremony awaited. As the raft came to a halt at the heart of the body of water, an absolute ringing silence descended. The golden man slid into the dark, cold waters of the lake. The precious metal washing away from his body was not merely a sacrifice, but an act of sacred purification, a symbol of his acceptance by the gods and an unbreakable bond with the great forces of nature. At that same instant, The priests, one by one, lowered their golden offerings into the unfathomable depths, sending them to the guardian spirits of the lake. Only after the completion of this mystery did the chief attain the status of a true ruler, whose authority had been approved and consecrated by the gods themselves. But was this depiction, captured in later European chronicles, entirely accurate? Modern scholars lean towards the idea that the image of a person showered in loose gold dust is a poetic exaggeration. More likely, more practical methods were employed. His body was either adhered with the thinnest sheets of gold or coated with a viscous mixture of fat or resin and gold powder, ensuring the precious covering would not be scattered by gusts of mountain wind. Nevertheless, the visual impact of this ritual was truly astonishing. In the rays of the rising sun or the torchlight, the individual truly appeared as a supernatural being, woven from pure light. When rumors of this incredible ritual reached the ears of the Spanish conquistadors, they were interpreted through the prism of an entirely different worldview. The Europeans were either unable or unwilling to perceive the profound religious symbolism and act of spiritual communion within this ritual. For them, the tale of a man covered in gold and a lake receiving precious offerings signified only one thing. Somewhere in the inaccessible mountains lay hidden a fount of untold riches. Thus, a sacred rite transformed into the legend of a lost city where gold literally lay scattered underfoot. The myth of Eldorado was born, and Lake Guatavita became, for centuries, an object of obsession and avarice. As early as the mid-15th century, the first Spanish expeditions attempted to reach these treasures, but the steep, almost sheer banks and considerable depth of the body of water made the endeavor impossible. In the late 16th century, an adventurer named Antonio de Sepulveda took an unprecedented step. He organized the excavation of a drainage channel through the bedrock to lower the water level. When the level dropped, valuable gold artifacts were indeed found on the exposed bottom. However, the rock soon gave way, and a landslide buried both the channel and the hopes of quick enrichment. Interest in the lake surged anew in the 19th century, and in the early 20th century, a British company undertook the most ambitious attempt to drain it, employing powerful industrial pumps. Over several months, they managed to lower the water level by 75 meters, but the bottom proved to be covered in a thick layer of viscous silt, and the few ornaments found did not even come close to covering the colossal costs. It was only underwater archaeological explorations conducted in the late 20th century that finally put an end to this story, unearthing small gold figurines on the lake bed that irrefutably proved ritualistic sacrifices had indeed taken place. Thus, after 4 centuries of obsession and titanic efforts, people finally received proof that the legend was true, but they were never able to come to terms with what that truth actually entailed. Nevertheless, the bulk of the treasures, if such ever rested on the bottom, remained securely buried beneath centuries-old layers of silt and sediment. Today, Lake Guatavita endures as a place steeped in legends, a silent keeper of an ancient mystery. It is quite probable that somewhere beneath its dark waters, priceless offerings to forgotten gods still lie, and with them, the key to unraveling a grand myth that forever changed the course of an entire continent's history. However, for the Spanish, consumed by their lust for gold, a single lake was not enough. They were deeply convinced that the rituals at Guatavita were merely the tip of the iceberg, and that somewhere beyond the impenetrable forests and mountain ranges lay hidden not just a body of water, but an entire empire where gold literally paved the ground. Thus, the myth of the Golden Man began to take on a life of its own, transforming and expanding into the magnificent legend of a lost city concealed in the very heart of South America. The initial searches were chaotic. Conquistador expeditions scoured the lands of modern-day Colombia, Venezuela, and Ecuador, torturing local inhabitants in hopes of extracting directions to the treasures. But each new tale, instead of bringing them closer to their goal, only further complicated the trail. Indigenous peoples, eager to rid themselves of the cruel and avaricious newcomers as quickly as possible, invariably pointed them eastward, deeper into the boundless and deadly Amazonian jungles. It was there that the most desperate and reckless expeditions ventured. One of the first Europeans to dare challenge the green hell of the Amazonian forests was Francisco de Orellana. In the mid-16th century, he set out on an expedition with Gonzalo Pizarro, who was originally searching not for gold, but for fertile cinnamon lands, a source of rare and fabulously expensive spices. However, the rosy dreams of untold riches very quickly gave way to a desperate struggle for survival. The jungle proved to be a far more ruthless adversary than the Spanish could have imagined. Impenetrable thickets turned every step into torture, while the omnipresent humidity corroded armor, clothing, and weapons. But the most terrifying enemy was hunger. Provisions dwindled rapidly, and attempts to find food locally often ended tragically. The conquistadors could not distinguish edible plants from deadly poisonous ones. Their steel swords and matchlock muskets proved powerless against the silent ambushes of the indigenous peoples, whose arrows, smeared with paralyzing curare poison, delivered certain death. At one point of desperation, a small detachment under Orellana's command, sent to search for food, reached the bank of a mighty river, whose powerful current swept their flimsy vessels away from the main camp. Attempts to paddle upstream proved futile, and the Spanish had no choice but to surrender to the will of nature and press onward. Unbeknownst to themselves, they became the first Europeans destined to traverse the entire South American continent from west to east along the course of the planet's greatest river. This journey devolved into a veritable nightmare. Orellana and his companions suffered from hunger, fever, and constant attacks from hostile tribes. One of the most astonishing events in their odyssey was a battle with a troop of tall and fierce female warriors who, according to entries in the ship's log, fought with courage and skill equal to the finest soldiers. Inspired by ancient legends, Orellana christened this river the Amazon, and the name has been affixed to it ever since. Only after many months of inhuman privation did a handful of emaciated survivors finally reach the Atlantic coast. They found neither gold nor cinnamon, but their journey charted a new, awe-inspiring geographical reality onto the world map. And yet, instead of dispelling the myth of El Dorado, their accounts only added fuel to the unquenchable thirst for gain. Although they did not discover the coveted gold, the mere fact that Orellana and his men managed to traverse an enormous, hitherto unknown continent inspired an entire generation of new adventurers. And even if his expedition did not initially aim to find El Dorado, his name later became inextricably linked with this chimera. Many believed that somewhere along his path, in the impenetrable depths of the jungle, he must have passed that very city of pure gold. Approximately 20 years later, a man whose story would inscribe one of the darkest and bloodiest pages in the annals of the conquest set out in search of the mythical kingdom. This man was Lope de Aguirre, a battle-hardened soldier and adventurer who joined an expedition led by Pedro de Ursua, heading down the Orinoco River. From its very inception, however, this venture bore the mark of doom. Searing tropical heat, insidious diseases, and a desperate scarcity of provisions rapidly eroded morale and discipline among the crew. Lope de Aguirre, a figure of extreme cruelty and volatile temperament, grew suspicious that his commander was deliberately leading the men to certain death. He orchestrated a conspiracy, ruthlessly eliminated Ursua, and seized control of the expedition by force. From that moment on, the journey devolved into a frenzied bloodbath. Aguirre was convinced that anyone who dared question his leadership deserved immediate obliteration. With unimaginable brutality, he dealt with anyone who showed the slightest dissent, accusing his own soldiers of treason and condemning them to agonizing deaths. The conquistadors found themselves battling not only hostile jungles and indigenous tribes, but also their own commander, who had utterly lost all touch with reality. When Aguirre realized that no El Dorado existed, he decided to defy not only cruel fate, but the Spanish monarchy itself. Declaring himself Wrath of God and Prince of Free Peru, he openly proclaimed his rebellion against the king, planning to seize coastal cities and establish his own dominion in what is now Venezuela. The finale of his story was predictably tragic. His men, pushed to the brink of despair, could no longer endure the terror he unleashed upon them. As soon as the remnants of his company reached the coast, they rose in mutiny. Aguirre was killed by his own soldiers, and his body was cast into the river. The Spanish crown forever branded his name as a symbol of betrayal, tyranny, and utter madness. Despite a string of catastrophic failures, the quest for El Dorado never ceased. Throughout the 17th and 18th centuries, the Spanish, Portuguese, Dutch, and even the French continued to dispatch new expeditions, one after another. No one was willing to accept the notion that the myth had proven stronger than reality. It seemed that somewhere, in the verdant heart of the continent, a city might still lie hidden, dazzlingly radiant in the sun's embrace. And as long as even one phantom chance remained to find it, there were always those willing to stake their very lives for an elusive dream. Yet the legend of El Dorado was far from the only lore concerning South America's lost cities. While Europeans clung to beliefs of a golden kingdom hidden deep within the jungles, the indigenous peoples themselves harbored their own myths of clandestine settlements, unseen by the eyes of the uninitiated. And one of the most enigmatic of these places was Paititi, a mysterious city many believed to be the last refuge of the great Inca civilization. When, in the mid-16th century, the magnificent capital of Cusco fell to the conquistadors and the empire itself was vanquished, surviving Inca nobility and guardians of ancient knowledge fled eastward. They sought refuge deep within the impenetrable forests, hoping to safeguard not only their sacred treasures from plunder, but also the very soul of their dying civilization. Thus were born the legends of Paititi, a formidable citadel concealed somewhere beyond the towering peaks of the Andes. In this secret city, so the whispers claimed, the Incas managed to resurrect their state and continue living according to ancestral laws, safe from the Spanish conquerors. These legends were no mere flights of fancy, they were rooted in very real historical events. It is historically documented that the Incas indeed retreated deeper into the jungles, where they succeeded in establishing the last bastion of their independence, a state with its capital in Vilcabamba, which endured for nearly 40 years after Cusco's fall. However, by the close of the 16th century, this stronghold too was discovered and annihilated by the Spanish. This very event ignited the crucial, tantalizing question: what if Vilcabamba was merely a temporary haven, and a small faction of Incas managed to venture even further east, into lands where a conquistador's boot had never trod? Gradually, the legend of Paititi gained increasing traction, transforming into a kind of Inca version of the El Dorado myth, yet imbued with an immeasurably deeper, sacred significance. For the Inca descendants, it was not merely a city of untold riches, but a symbol of a surviving civilization, the final stronghold of their knowledge and traditions. For European adventurers, however, all these cultural nuances were nothing more than a poetic aside. In their minds, tales of Paititi inevitably merged with the legend of El Dorado, becoming just another chapter in the saga of hidden treasures. Thus, two grand dreams, one of a civilization's salvation, the other of untold gold, converged at a single point on a map, a point that perhaps never truly existed. For centuries, the legend of Paititi has stirred the imaginations of diverse individuals, from desperate adventurers to serious archaeological scholars, compelling them to embark on quests for the mythical city. As early as the 18th century, Portuguese missionaries, carrying out their calling in untamed lands, relayed tales heard from indigenous tribes about a settlement hidden deep within an impenetrable forest thicket. Much later, in the 20th century, Peruvian researchers stumbled upon mysterious ruins in the eastern reaches of the Andes, However, irrefutable proof that these were indeed the remains of the legendary Paititi has yet to be found. And today, this phantom chase continues, but now maps and compasses have been supplanted by cutting-edge technology. Satellite imagery has already unveiled the contours of previously unknown ancient settlements in the Amazonian jungles, kindling fresh hope. Yet, Paititi is not the sole enigma concealed within South America's verdant labyrinths. In the shadow of this prominent legend exists another, far less known to the general public, but no less stirring. Its name is Nan Madol. Among the select circle of adventurers and explorers of the unknown, this name alone can evoke a reverent awe, for its tales embody all the hallmarks of classic lost world lore. According to legend, this city lies lost in the continent's most impenetrable jungles, perhaps within the lands of modern-day Brazil or Venezuela. Its walls, purportedly built from Cyclopean basalt blocks, are said to hold memories of times even predating the flourishing of the Inca Empire. Herein lies its chief distinction from Paititi. While the latter is intimately tied to a specific people and their history, Nan Madol presents an absolute mystery. No one can confidently speak of its creators or the era of its existence. Whispers of this phantom place began to seep into the outside world in the 19th and 20th centuries, as brave pioneers, venturing deep into the heart of the Amazon, brought back accounts from local tribes. They spoke of majestic ruins swallowed by vegetation, of stone pathways that vanished into nowhere, and of the sinister fate of those who dared to seek the city and vanished without a trace into the green abyss. Of course, official archaeology currently possesses no confirmation of Nan Madol's reality. Many scholars lean toward the idea that it is merely an amalgam, a myth born from fragmented information about numerous real but long-vanished settlements in the jungle. Yet, modern technology provides food for thought. Satellite images of the most remote parts of the Amazon sometimes reveal anomalies, perfectly straight lines and geometric shapes that are difficult to attribute to natural formations. Perhaps these are the scars on the Earth's surface left by long-departed civilizations. Much like the eternal chase for Eldorado, the quests for Paititi and Nan Madol persist, not merely driven by a hunger for treasure. These myths are more than simple tales of gold. They embody a longing for lost knowledge, a primal fear of the unknown, and an inextinguishable hope that somewhere in the most hidden corners of the world, something incredible might still be concealed, capable of overturning our understanding of the past. For centuries, these legends have fueled imagination and spurred people to acts of heroism and madness. But did these alluring stories have a real foundation? Could genuinely rich cities, brimming with gold, have existed in the Andes or the boundless Amazonian forests, somehow miraculously escaping the gaze of the Spanish conquistadors? For the historical facts are irrefutable. The civilizations of this region indeed possessed immeasurable quantities of the precious metal. It was this undeniable fact that drew a thin but unbreakable line beyond which myth ceased to be mere folklore and transformed into a call to action. For the indigenous peoples of the Andes, be they Incas or Muiscas, gold possessed a value incommensurate with worldly wealth. It was not a tool for enrichment, as it was for Europeans, but a sacred metal, embodying a direct connection to the divine pantheon and playing a key role in religious rituals. The Incas had established the mining of this metal in the Andes long before a Spanish conquistador's foot ever touched their lands. It was in the vicinity of Cajamarca, where the last Inca ruler Atahualpa was captured, that Europeans first encountered the true scale of the empire's golden treasures. They were not so much stunned by the sheer quantity of the precious metal as by its sacred application. Gigantic gold plates covered temple walls, and golden statues of deities and rulers' thrones were cast from it. Contrary to popular myth, the Incas never had a single golden city. Their untold riches were dispersed throughout the empire, and a significant portion was successfully confiscated and shipped to Europe by the Spanish. However, while the fate of Andean gold is generally known, the question of Amazonian treasures remains far more nebulous and complex. For a long time, the prevailing scientific consensus was that the humid and hostile tropical forests could not have cradled large, developed civilizations capable of accumulating significant gold reserves. Recent research is fundamentally altering this established view. The breakthrough occurred in the last decade with the advent of LiDAR, laser scanning technology that has literally allowed us to peer through the impenetrable jungle canopy. With its help, traces of previously unknown ancient settlements have been discovered in the Amazon, some of which exhibit astonishingly complex layouts, networks of roads, formidable fortifications, and ritual centers. These discoveries irrefutably prove that the Amazon in the past was not merely wild jungle, but home to highly organized and complex societies. And although archaeologists have not yet been fortunate enough to unearth golden cities in the form described by legends, numerous finds of gold artifacts in regions adjacent to the Amazon confirm that the ancient peoples of this area possessed technologies for processing precious metals and had access to their reserves. Perhaps further research will lead to discoveries that compel us to entirely rewrite the ancient history of South America. Perhaps the most eloquent archaeological evidence which transformed legend into fact came from Colombia, the so-called Muisca raft, or the golden boat from Lake Guatavita. This exquisite artifact, crafted by the skilled artisans of the Muisca people, depicts a sacred ritual. A new ruler, his body completely covered in gold dust, sailing on a raft to the center of the sacred Lake Guatavita to offer gifts to the gods. This figurine, discovered back in the 19th century, became material confirmation of the Spanish chronicles concerning the Golden Man ceremonies, which ignited the enduring myth of Eldorado. But this discovery is far from the only one. Across the lands of modern-day Colombia, Peru, and Ecuador, archaeologists have unearthed thousands of gold artifacts belonging to diverse cultures: the Muisca, the Chimu, and the Inca. These were masterful adornments, funerary masks, ceremonial figurines, and amulets. Yet, one of the most breathtaking revelations in this field was the discovery of the golden tomb of the Lord of Sipan in Peru. In 1987, archaeologists stumbled upon the utterly pristine burial site of a Moche ruler who lived approximately 16 centuries ago. The excavation of this burial proved incontrovertibly that myths of unimaginable riches were not mere fantasies, and that the very soil of South America could still unveil treasures far exceeding the wildest imagination. The tomb's contents were astonishing. Nestled within lay an unbelievable array of pure gold artifacts, including breastplates, diadems, intricately designed earrings, and ceremonial goblets, all entirely sheathed in the precious metal. This discovery immediately entered the annals as one of the greatest archaeological events of the 20th century, as it offered scholars the first opportunity to witness pre-Columbian nobility's burial rituals in their untouched, pristine grandeur. Gold was also unearthed in the hard-to-reach, high-altitude regions of the Andes, where it was utilized not only by the mighty Inca, but also by even more ancient civilizations that preceded them. For instance, the Tiwanaku culture, which flourished long before the Inca, also left behind golden artifacts, serving as testament to their complex religious practices. All these discoveries, when pieced together, paint a clear picture. Gold truly held a central position in the spiritual and material culture of ancient South American peoples. Yet, not a single mythical city built entirely of the precious metal has ever been found. Gold-bearing lands did exist, but the treasures were not concentrated in one location. Rather, they were dispersed across vast territories, finding purpose in rituals, serving as material for adornments, and decorating temples. Nevertheless, the search continues, and modern technologies, like a key to a locked door, are unlocking ever more chapters of ancient history. It is not unlikely that deep within the jungles, or amidst the cloud-shrouded ruins of the Andes, Artifacts still await their moment, capable of yielding answers to the most profound mysteries of the past. When in 1532 the Spanish captured the last Inca emperor, Atahualpa, they could not have imagined the incredible offer he would make them. Realizing that the conquistadors' sole driving force was an insatiable hunger for gold, Atahualpa offered them an unprecedented ransom for his freedom. He vowed to fill one of the rooms in the palace at Cajamarca with gold, stacked as high as his outstretched hand, and to fill 2 more identical rooms with silver. Blinded by the prospect of fabulous wealth, the Spanish accepted his terms. Soon, caravans laden with treasure converged on Cajamarca from every corner of the vast empire. Golden statues, ceremonial masks, and plates that once adorned temple walls were mercilessly melted down into ingots and stacked high in the ransom chamber. However, even with the terms almost fulfilled, Francisco Pizarro did not keep his word. Fearing that a freed Atahualpa could rally resistance and raise a new army, the Spanish treacherously executed him. But what became of the portion of the ransom that never reached Cajamarca? Legend has it that numerous caravans were still en route when news of the emperor's death reached them. The priests and warriors accompanying the precious cargo resolved to hide it, preventing the sacred gold from falling into the hands of the foreign invaders. Many versions exist concerning the precise location where these treasures were hidden. Some traditions point to an intricate network of underground passages beneath Cusco or to hidden caches lost in the mountains. Others, more romantically, assert that the gold was carried into the impenetrable jungles and became the foundation for the mythical city of Paititi. The Spanish never succeeded in finding these riches, even though their searches, at times desperate and brutal, continued for centuries. If Atahualpa's treasures truly exist, their whereabouts remain to this day one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in world history. This gold is not merely an immeasurable fortune, but the last symbol of the Incas' desperate resistance, their final attempt to safeguard their heritage from the conqueror's greed. But if the colossal treasures of an entire empire could indeed be so securely hidden, where did their final secret path lead? Perhaps one of the most captivating topics surrounding the Inca legacy is the hypothesis of secret underground passages that, according to lore, permeate the entire territory of their former empire. Legends persistently claim that beneath the ancient capital, the city of Cusco, lies an incredibly complex and extensive network of tunnels. It is said that these hidden passages connected temples, led to treasuries, and even provided links between the city and distant fortresses, allowing for the discreet transfer of warriors and supplies. The most famous entrance to this hypothetical subterranean system, if tales are to be believed, was located beneath the foundations of Coricancha, the principal temple of the sun in Cusco. Contemporaries who saw it before its destruction described this sanctuary as a genuine wonder of the world. Its walls were clad in pure gold plates. An artificial garden of precious metal plants bloomed in its inner courtyard, and the statues of the gods shimmered dazzlingly in the sunlight. When the Spanish conquistadors seized the city, they plundered and demolished the temple, erecting the convent of Santo Domingo upon its sacred foundation. Nevertheless, many were convinced that the Spanish never managed to discover all the secret passages originating in Coricancha's underworld. According to legends, one of these tunnels plunged to an unimaginable depth, leading to lost repositories where the Inca hid their greatest treasures. Stories of those who attempted to enter these labyrinths only to vanish without a trace were passed down through generations. For instance, in the 16th century, as legend tells it, a detachment of gold-obsessed Spaniards entered one such passage and disappeared forever. Years later, their remains were supposedly discovered a vast distance from Cusco, which only reinforced the rumors of a gigantic network of tunnels stretching for hundreds of miles. But is there even a kernel of truth in these accounts? Some researchers hold the opinion that underground passages did exist, but their scale is greatly exaggerated. Most likely, these were small hidden caches, not grandiose labyrinths traversing the entire empire. However, archaeological work in Cusco has indeed uncovered tunnels descending deep into the earth, though many of them have proven to be collapsed or flooded. Today, exploration of Cusco's underground is severely restricted due to the high risk of ancient structures collapsing. Peruvian authorities have placed a moratorium on large-scale excavations, fearing irreversible damage to unique historical monuments. However, with the advent of technologies such as ground-penetrating radar, archaeologists now have new, non-invasive methods for studying the mysteries of the ancient capital. If the beliefs of the ancestors are correct, then Atahualpa's treasures and the Inca's underground passages remain among South America's most intriguing and unsolved enigmas. Perhaps one day, advanced technology, or simply a fortunate stroke of luck, will lead humanity to discoveries capable of fundamentally altering our understanding of the lost treasure's fate. But to truly grasp the nature of this mystery, one must realize that for the Inca, gold was far more than mere wealth. It was a sacred metal, the earthly embodiment of the sun, and the very source of this light, the deity named Inti, held a central place in their pantheon. Inti not only bestowed warmth and light, he was the arbiter of the entire empire's destiny, the guarantor of its prosperity, order, and the legitimacy of its rulers, who considered themselves his direct descendants on earth. It was to Inti that they appealed in times of hardship, and to him that their most generous offerings were dedicated. To grasp why the cult of the sun held such fundamental significance, one must view the world through Inca eyes and understand how they perceived its role in nature, societal life, and the very structure of their authority. For them, the sun was not merely a distant celestial body, but the very pulsating heart of creation. Piercing the thin mountain air, the sun's rays warmed the earth, awakened its fertile powers, and ensured the growth of vital crops. In the harsh Andean conditions, where climatic whims were commonplace, it was the sun's generosity that determined whether the people would thrive in abundance or weaken, tormented by hunger. Thus, sunlight was not merely a source of physical warmth, but a tangible symbol of prosperity and well-being. When the sun shone brightly over the empire, it was regarded as a sign of divine favor. The harvest would surely be plentiful, and the state strong and unwavering. But should the sun hide behind a veil of clouds, or should prolonged rains or, conversely, scorching droughts begin, it was perceived as an ominous presage, an unequivocal sign of Inti's wrath. Solar eclipses evoked a distinct, almost primal terror in the Inca. In their worldview, during these eerie moments, the universe teetered on a knife's edge, poised on the brink of inevitable catastrophe. The Inca believed that the sun could extinguish forever, dragging into oblivion all established order, light, and life itself. On such frightening days, priests immediately commenced emergency rites, raising rich offerings to the heavens and directing passionate pleas to Inti with a single request: to return and illuminate the world once more with his radiance. The solar cult was so deeply ingrained in the Inca worldview that their civilization literally depended on daylight. The cessation of the celestial body's radiance was not perceived as a natural phenomenon, but as an inevitable apocalypse, the complete and ultimate termination of existence. Yet the deity Inti not only bestowed life and warmth, but also served as the unshakable bedrock of all state authority. In the Inca worldview, their supreme ruler, the Sapa Inca, was not merely divinely appointed, but Inti's direct blood descendant on earth. This sacred status, enshrined in the official title Son of Inti, transformed the emperor into a living demigod, whose decrees and commands held absolute power and were beyond all question, for they emanated directly from the celestial sovereign's heir. At the heart of sun worship stood the majestic temple complex of Coricancha, erected in the very core of the capital city, Cusco. This sanctuary was conceived as an earthly mirror of divine radiance. Its massive stone walls were entirely clad in sheets of pure gold, which, catching the sun's rays, suffused the surroundings with dazzling light. The inner courtyard was adorned with effigies of humans, animals, and plants, also exquisitely cast from the precious metal, while at the very heart of the temple resided a gigantic golden disc, the foremost material symbol of Inti himself. The Spanish who arrived on these lands, awestruck not by its spiritual grandeur, but by its sheer material opulence, ruthlessly stripped away and melted down this gold, forever wiping from the face of the earth one of the Inca civilization's greatest creations. The veneration of Inti assumed its deepest spiritual weight during the ceremony, marking a new emperor's ascension to the throne. This ritual was far more than a mere political transfer of power. It was a profound mystical communion through which the sovereign became the mortal embodiment of the sun's very essence. Priests conducted intricate rites, imploring Inti to acknowledge and bestow blessings upon his newly chosen son. The monarch himself, resplendent in lavish robes intricately embroidered with threads of pure gold, emerged before his populace as the very first rays of dawn kissed the horizon. He extended his arms toward the ascending sun, symbolically imbibing its divine energy, which was believed to imbue him with profound wisdom and unyielding strength. The dramatic crescendo of the ceremony arrived with the anointing of the mascapaicha, a singular royal crown woven from threads of crimson and gleaming gold, a sacred regalia permitted to be worn by the Sapa Inca alone. This powerful gesture served as undeniable proof that Inti himself had sanctioned the new sovereign. Not even the cold embrace of physical death could sever this divine covenant. The remains of deceased rulers underwent meticulous mummification and were reverently enshrined within the temples as the most revered sacred relics. They were periodically brought forth into Cusco's central plaza during momentous state celebrations, where they continued to preside among the living, eloquently affirming the perpetual and immutable nature of power bestowed by the sun itself. Thus, Inti was far more than merely one deity among a pantheon. He was the indispensable linchpin upon which the entire imperial edifice rested. His light served as the very synonym for life, order, and boundless prosperity. His divine will was the ultimate law, and his blessings the sacred guarantee of imperial might and the people's unending hope that the sun's radiant embrace would never dim over their cherished lands. The system thus forged appeared absolutely unshakable, its very legitimacy derived from the celestial realms themselves. But what cataclysm might unfold, should the shadow of doubt one day fall not upon the divine being, but upon the very mortal who proclaimed himself Inti's sole son on earth? While the Coricancha temple might not have boasted the colossal scale of certain other edifices, its spiritual and political gravitas remained unparalleled, firmly establishing it as the preeminent sanctuary of the entire empire. Its hallowed walls were entirely sheathed in sheets of pure, unblemished gold, which, like 1,000 gleaming mirrors, captured and infinitely amplified the sun's brilliant rays. Within the sacred heart of the structure reposed a colossal disc, forged from the very same precious metal, serving as Inti's terrestrial manifestation. Inside this hallowed repository of faith, the most vital imperial relics were carefully guarded, and here too a ceaseless torrent of lavish offerings converged from every far-flung corner of the vast dominion. The daily rituals meticulously observed by the priests served a singular purpose: to powerfully demonstrate that the sun was not merely the source of all light, but the undisputed supreme ruler of the cosmos itself. Each morning, the priests greeted the dawn, raising golden chalices filled with ritual libations to the heavens. Access to Coricancha's innermost, most hallowed sanctums was strictly restricted. Only the high priests and the Sapa Inca himself were permitted entry, while for common folk, its precincts remained forever sealed. Yet, the reverence for the celestial orb was not confined within temple walls. Once a year, on the day of the winter solstice, the entire nation held its breath, awaiting the grand festival of Inti Raymi. On this day, Cusco's central plaza transformed into a magnificent stage for the year's most pivotal ritual, where the people offered praise to their deity, praying for a bountiful harvest and prosperity. The celebration resonated with resounding music, ritualistic dances, and dramatic enactments narrating the creation of the world. The climactic moment of the entire ceremony arrived with the emperor's emergence. He stepped forth before his subjects in the first rays of the rising sun, embodying the living manifestation of the deity Inti on earth. Priests presented generous offerings to the god, the finest grains, the most exquisite textiles, and masterfully crafted gold figurines, before performing the ritualistic sacrifice of white llamas, whose still warm blood was used for divining the future. At this precise moment, the entire plaza fell into an absolute palpable silence, as every soul, holding its breath, awaited a sign of whether the great Inti would accept their offerings. The significance of Inti Raymi was so profound that even the Spanish conquistadors could not eradicate it. Despite colonial authorities imposing the most stringent ban on pagan rituals, the indigenous population continued to secretly observe the solstice day, skillfully weaving elements of Christian faith into the ancient rites. Only in the 20th century was the festival officially revived as part of the historical and cultural heritage. And now this large-scale reenactment annually draws thousands of people to Cusco, eager to connect with the grandeur of the ancient civilization. However, the splendor of the solar sanctuaries lay not merely in the abundance of gold or the opulence of the ceremonies. The Incas were ingenious architects who masterfully employed the principles of optics to produce the desired sacred effect. They utilized so-called solar mirrors, perfectly polished plates of metal and gold, positioned at precisely calculated angles to capture, concentrate, and redirect streams of light. As the sun ascended from behind the mountain peaks, its rays, streaming into the temple through specially designed apertures, reflected repeatedly off these surfaces, transforming the entire structure into a dazzling, almost otherworldly source of illumination. This technique was employed not only in the capital's Coricancha, but also in other temples throughout the empire, especially those erected atop mountain summits, where the gilded plates were the first to catch the morning rays, creating the illusion that the sanctuary itself radiated divine luminescence. The Inca Empire presented a magnificent stage where light, stone, and gold coalesced into a singular spectacle designed to affirm the divine nature of power. But could this dazzling construct truly endure if its audience were to one day question the performance unfolding before their very eyes? Even after the downfall of their grand empire, the Inca worldview did not vanish into oblivion. The memory of the mighty sun god continues to live on in vibrant festivals, in legends passed down through generations, and in the silent ruins of ancient cities that, even today, seem to hold lingering echoes of his former brilliance. At the core of their cosmos lay the idea of universal harmony, born from the unity of opposites, and thus even the all-powerful solar deity Inti could not rule in solitude. His light demanded a complement, and his authority was inconceivable as absolute without the participation of the moon, the stars, and even darkness itself. Opposite this fiery, masculine principle, which embodied unyielding order and state power, stood Mama Killa, the moon goddess, revered as Inti's sister and consort. Her role in the cosmic drama was no less vital. If Inti bestowed strength, Mama Killa was responsible for gentleness, for the rhythms of time itself, and for the profound protection of all living things. Unlike the eternal and unchanging solar disk, the moon's face constantly transformed, cycling through phases of birth, waning, and new rebirth. The Incas saw in this a sacred reflection of all earthly life, feminine nature, and the grand cycles of the natural world. It was Mama Killa who patronized women, the sacred mystery of marriage and the miracle of childbirth, and her silvery light, it was believed, safeguarded newborn infants. Wedding ceremonies were therefore ideally conducted during a full moon, hoping that this would bring the new family happiness and abundance. The moon also played a crucially practical role. The Incas meticulously aligned their agrarian life not only with the solar, but also with the lunar calendar, determining the optimal times for sowing and harvesting based on its phases. It was believed that the growth of plants was directly dependent on moonlight, and an especially bright nocturnal glow promised a generous yield. But if the silver disk in the sky suddenly began to wane during an eclipse, it was perceived as an ominous sign, warning of impending calamities, famine, or disease. Beyond the moon, the stars served as celestial guides for the Incas, and among them, the Pleiades cluster, known as Colca, held a special place. The appearance of these stars in the night sky at a specific time of year served as an unmistakable signal for the start of a new agricultural season. A bright and clear Colca glow signified divine favor and promised a fertile year. If, however, the stars were dim or rose late, the priests raised an alarm, preparing the people for potential hardships. The Pleiades also served as a bridge between worlds. The Incas believed that the souls of the righteous ascended to these distant stars after death, and some myths even named them the spirits of ancient rulers, observing their descendants from the heavens. Despite all his power, Inti was not omnipotent. Each evening, his reign was interrupted as he vanished below the horizon, ceding the world to the dominion of night. According to their beliefs, sunset was not merely the transition from day to night, but a moment when Inti plunged into the depths of the underworld for a nightly battle with the spirits of primordial darkness, who sought to forever engulf his life-giving light. Their entire world rested on the fragile certainty of this eternal battle's outcome, for no one dared to ask, what if, one day, the light lost? Nighttime, in the Inca imagination, was not simply a period devoid of daylight, but an arena of titanic struggle where the very existence of the world hung by a thread each night. Every dawn was perceived not as a mundane change in time of day, but as Inti's triumphant return, a symbol of his renewed victory in the battle against the forces of gloom, after which he once more proudly ascended his celestial throne. The greatest terror and awe were reserved for solar eclipses. This phenomenon was interpreted unequivocally. Dark forces had temporarily gained the upper hand, and the entire cosmos faced imminent destruction. In such moments, priests swiftly initiated emergency rituals designed to help the weakened deity regain his power. Common people poured into the streets, beating drums, raising prayers and loud shouts to the sky, creating an unimaginable cacophony in the hope of frightening away the ominous darkness. Some Spanish chroniclers even reported that during especially long eclipses, the Incas resorted to extreme measures, ritual sacrifices of llamas, and even acts of self-mutilation to appease the angered gods. This eternal struggle between light and shadow also found its reflection in the training system for future warriors. Young men undergoing the initiation rite were required to spend several nights in complete solitude high in the mountains or within deep caves. In this way, they personally experienced the primal fear of darkness and learned to overcome it. This ordeal symbolized Inti's own journey through the underworld and prepared young warriors not to falter before the unknown, but to bravely engage it in battle. Thus, the worship of Inti was not some isolated cult. It was an integral part of an incredibly complex cosmogonic system in which the sun, moon, stars, and darkness were woven into a single, unbreakable knot. The Incas did not simply conduct astronomical observations. In the movement of celestial bodies, they saw echoes of an eternal confrontation between cosmic forces upon whose outcome their own destiny depended. This profound faith bound their society together, permeated all rituals, and was passed from father to son, serving as a reminder that light is only possible where there is darkness, and that even the brightest sun requires its companions. Despite their profound faith in the sun as the fount of life and cosmic harmony, Inca mythology also held a somber legend about what would happen if Inti were ever to withdraw his favor from humanity. This rare tale, known as the Saga of the Endless Night, recounted a time when the sun vanished forever, plunging the world into an abyss of cold and chaos. The story goes that in ages long past, humanity began to neglect their hallowed obligations. They grew complacent, abandoned the ancestral rites, and started to show utter disregard for the very fabric of nature, the soil, the waters, and their guiding spirits. Inti long observed their deeds from the celestial realm, but his cup of forbearance overflowed. In his fury, he averted his gaze from the earthly realm, and the sun never graced the horizon again. The age of great darkness descended. Days became indistinguishable from nights. The earth grew cold, plants ceased to grow, and animals began to perish. Ice gripped the rivers, and all the crops died in the fields. Plunged into utter darkness, people began to wither, not just in body, but in spirit. The ancient lore recounts that during this light-starved era, sinister nocturnal entities emerged from their dark lairs, intent on finally claiming the world. Priests and rulers desperately tried to appease Inti, the sun god, but their usual sacrifices and pleas had no effect. Then, the bravest warriors, wisest sages, and most revered priests embarked on a desperate pilgrimage to the most sacred sites of the empire, pleading for forgiveness. They ascended the icy peaks of the Andes and performed rituals in desolate temples, but the great Inti remained silent. The world teetered on the brink of annihilation, and it seemed no power could ever restore the light. But what if salvation lay hidden not in pleas to the gods, but within the human heart itself? Only at that moment, when the despairing people finally grasped the full depth of their misdeeds and truly repented for their actions, when they once more reverently honored their Mother Earth, the spirits of their ancestors, and the great gods, only then, on the edge of the blackened horizon, did a faint rim of the sun's disk slowly begin to emerge. It was a long-awaited sign of forgiveness, and the Inca understood that their world had been granted a second chance. Thus, the legend of the Great Darkness became not merely a terrifying tale, but an eternal reminder of the fragility of order and divine grace. But having received this forgiveness, did they truly learn the ultimate lesson, or were the seeds of future oblivion already sown anew? The lore of the Great Darkness left an indelible mark on the consciousness of the Inca people, giving rise to an almost sacred dread at the possibility of this cataclysm repeating. It was this fear that transformed sun worship from a mere tradition into a vital, sacred vow designed to eternally safeguard the world from succumbing to darkness. The flame of this faith did not wane even when the empire itself crumbled into ruins. The memory of the divine luminary continued to warm the souls of the ancient people's descendants. The Spanish conquistadors who arrived in these lands undertook a resolute attempt to eradicate the cult of Inti, imposing the strictest ban on all pagan ceremonies. However, this policy, akin to spiritual genocide, could not destroy beliefs that were rooted deep in the mists of time. Faith in the solar deity went underground, preserved in the form of secret rituals and oral traditions, which were passed down by word of mouth in secluded mountain villages, far from the watchful eye of the colonial administration. There, in the stillness of the Andes, people continued to offer prayers, so that their celestial patron would never again turn his face away from the earth. This unbroken, centuries-long connection to their ancestral legacy became the fertile ground for the astonishing resurgence of Inti worship in the modern era. The most vibrant embodiment of this renaissance is the grand Inti Raymi festival, held annually in the ancient Inca capital, the city of Cusco. This festivity's roots stretch deep into antiquity, to a time when the Inca performed sacred rites on the day of the winter solstice to honor the sun god and seek his blessing for the coming year. Even though the Spanish conquest led to a ban on Inti Raymi in the 20th century, Peruvian scholars and enthusiasts, drawing on historical chronicles and surviving accounts, meticulously recreated this ritual, breathing new life into it. Today, Inti Raymi has transformed into one of the largest and most spectacular cultural events in South America. Annually, on June 24th, thousands of spectators and participants flock to Cusco to be part of this magnificent spectacle. The festival begins at the ruins of Coricancha, once the principal temple of the sun, where priests address Inti with pleas for light, warmth, and fertility. From there, a solemn procession, accompanied by traditional music, theatrical scenes depicting the empire's life, and ritual dances, proceeds to the city's central plaza. The culmination of the entire ritual unfolds within the walls of the monumental fortress of Sacsayhuaman, where the main ceremony of symbolic homage to the celestial luminary takes place. At the pivotal moment of the ceremony, an actor portraying the supreme ruler, the Sapa Inca, clad in garments shimmering with gold, raises his hands to the sky, greeting the first rays of the sun. At the same time, priests make symbolic offerings, precisely replicating the actions of their distant ancestors. And while the modern ceremony is largely theatrical in nature, for countless Peruvians, it remains a deeply personal spiritual experience. This is not just a colorful show for tourists, but a living thread connecting them to a glorious past and allowing them to feel part of a centuries-old tradition. Thus, Inti Raymi has become not only a national treasure of Peru, but also a powerful symbol of cultural resurgence for the entire Andean region. Just as the sun returned to the people in the ancient myth after their repentance, so too has faith in Inti once again taken a place of honor in the hearts of the Inca's descendants, serving as an eternal reminder of their roots and the unbreakable law. Light always triumphs over darkness. However, their spiritual worldview was not limited to the celestial luminary alone. The Inca were convinced that their surrounding reality, the mountains, rivers, and forests, was inhabited by countless spirits. These entities possessed a complex and dual nature. Some could offer aid and protection, others would send trials to wayfarers, while still others acted as formidable guardians of nature, mercilessly punishing anyone who dared disrupt its harmony. The lore, passed down through generations by shamans and hunters, is replete with tales of encounters with these spirits, and each such account served as a stern warning to exercise the utmost caution when interacting with them. Among the vast array of these beings, the most mysterious and least understood were believed to be the Airy, spirits said to bestow their unique power and patronage upon shamans. And one could only wonder whether these powerful allies were truly benevolent benefactors or guides into such profound depths of the cosmos where mortals were forbidden to tread. According to ancient beliefs, the path of a shaman was not merely an apprenticeship, but the forging of a mystical alliance with spirit mentors, known as the Airy. These entities never assumed a single form, appearing to shamans as elusive shadows, as animals, or as strange, humanoid beings with unsettlingly distorted features. It was believed that a shaman graced with the Airy's patronage gained supernatural gifts, the ability to discern what was hidden from mortal eyes, the power to converse with nature spirits, and the skill to traverse between the physical and otherworldly realms. However, such a bond always came with immense risk. If a shaman showed disrespect for traditions, violated prohibitions imposed by the spirits, or used their acquired knowledge for ill, the Airy immediately severed their alliance. Myths tell of the terrible fate of those who lost the patronage of their mentors. They transformed into wandering specters, forever trapped between worlds and unable to find their way to either the living or the dead. For this very reason, the vast majority of shamanic rituals were aimed at maintaining the delicate balance between the human realm and the spirit world. Among the pantheon of guardian spirits, a unique and revered place was held by Karu Sapa, the great jaguar spirit, guardian of the wild forests. Unlike the Eri, who formed personal bonds with chosen shamans, Karu Sapa served no one and was not tied to humans. He was the embodiment of primal nature itself, its unseen and formidable protector. Legends described him as a colossal black jaguar with eyes that blazed with otherworldly fire and a silent, almost spectral gait. His purpose was to observe the behavior of humans who trespassed into his domain. Those travelers who carried kindness and wisdom in their hearts were never troubled by him. But those who showed disrespect for nature were inevitably met with his wrath. It was said that Karu Sapa mastered the art of shape-shifting and loved to test uninvited guests. He might appear as an elder with a piercing gaze or a silent hunter watching from afar. If a person answered his questions honestly and with reverence, the spirit allowed them to continue their journey. But should a traveler lie or display contempt for the forest, Karu Sapa would vanish, and soon inexplicable misfortunes would befall the person. They would lose their way, be struck by sudden illness, or become easy prey for predators. Despite the advent of the age of science and technology, belief in shape-shifting spirits has not faded into oblivion. In the 20th century, ethnographers recorded numerous testimonies from hunters and shamans who claimed to have personally encountered such entities. One such account belongs to a shaman from the Shipibo-Konibo people who, in the 1960s, ventured alone into the forest depths in search of rare ritual plants. At one point, he felt a watchful gaze upon him. Soon, a massive black jaguar appeared before him, showing no aggression, but merely standing still and observing. The shaman instantly understood that it was Karu Sapa himself and addressed him with a prayer, vowing not to harm the forest. Only then did the beast dissolve into the air, leaving deep paw prints on the ground that mysteriously vanished by morning. Another story was recorded from a hunter's words who, in the 1980s, was hunting alone in the forest. He stumbled upon an old man sitting on a boulder, leisurely smoking a pipe. The stranger initiated conversation and inquired what had brought the hunter to these remote parts. The hunter honestly replied that he was seeking game. The old man nodded silently and pointed him toward an inconspicuous trail. However, when the hunter momentarily turned away to examine it and then looked back, the old man was gone. On the stone where he had just sat, only the imprints of enormous animal paws remained. All that night, the man heard growling and heavy footsteps around his camp, but never saw a single living creature. He left the forest at dawn, carrying not game, but a chilling realization. That night, he himself had been the prey, and for some reason, the unseen hunter had chosen to let him go. He returned to his village empty-handed, but with the bone-chilling certainty that his encounter was not with a mortal, but with Karu Sapa himself. Such tales, passed down by word of mouth, serve as living proof that even in our rational age, belief in shape-shifting spirits has not died out. For many indigenous peoples of the Amazon, the jungle remains a sacred territory where humans are merely temporary guests, and ancient guardians tirelessly watch over everyone who dares to tread upon their lands. But the spiritual tapestry of the Inca and Amazonian tribes was woven with more than just nature's guardians and shamanic guides. Within it also lurked entities from which there was no escape. Spectral beings whose presence foreshadowed calamity, mysterious vanishings, or imminent doom. These spirits weren't concerned with simple retribution for misdeeds. They operated by their own humanly unfathomable logic, luring, terrifying, and drawing their victims into an abyss of the unknown. Among the most unsettling denizens of this world were the Chulupi, a diminutive folk dwelling deep within impenetrable forest thickets. Legends describe them as beings no taller than a human child, yet imbued with astonishing agility and cunning. They could only be encountered in the deepest, most secluded corners of the jungle, where they led reclusive lives, hunting small game and establishing their settlements, invisible to outsiders. The Chulupi rarely revealed themselves openly to humans, yet their unseen presence was betrayed by strange sounds drifting from the undergrowth, tiny footprints on the damp earth, and unexplained disappearances of items from travelers' camps. Their most chilling obsession, however, was the abduction of human children. Laura whispered that the Chulupi descended under the cloak of night when villagers lay deep in slumber, silently spiriting away infants into their sylvan domains. Afterward, the child was impossible to find. They simply dissolved into the spirit world, vanishing forever. Some shamans theorized that the Chulupi didn't steal children out of malevolence, but rather to transform them into beings like themselves. A child lost in the forest, according to these beliefs, could themselves become one of these creatures, their former life entirely forgotten. It was said that at times childish laughter would echo from the depths of the jungle, or tiny figures would flit among the trees. But any who dared to answer that call risked sharing the grim fate of the abducted. Another ominous phenomenon that struck primeval dread into the hearts of travelers was the legend of the loose mala, the evil light. This mystical phenomenon manifested as a pale, flickering flame that would appear at night over swamps, forest paths, and riverbanks. According to folklore, this was no natural occurrence, but a trap spirit luring people to their doom. Eyewitnesses who encountered the loose mala unanimously claimed that the light possessed its own will and moved purposefully, as if beckoning them closer. Exhausted wanderers, having lost their way, often mistook it for the faint glow of a distant village or the welcoming warmth of a campfire. They would follow this spectral beacon, but it would invariably recede, drawing them ever deeper into the impenetrable thicket from which there was no return. One interpretation of this legend links the loose mala with the belief in the restless souls of the departed. Some tribes believed these to be the wandering spirits of those who could not find peace after death, and they were especially perilous for individuals entering the forest with ill intent. The shaman's warnings were stern and unequivocal. If you behold a wandering light in the night, under no circumstances are you to follow it. Turn away and seek your path in the opposite direction. For in these lands, the most formidable judge was neither human nor beast, but that invisible threshold separating the realm of the living from a world ever ready to devour it whole. Yet, tales of otherworldly forces are not merely relics of a distant past. They cast their ominous shadows even upon more recent times. In the 20th century, numerous instances of mysterious disappearances in the jungle were documented, which the local populace consistently attributed to the workings of spirits. One of the most inexplicable incidents occurred in the 1940s in the Amazonian region, when a team of 5 lumberjacks vanished without a trace. The search party discovered their camp entirely undisturbed. Personal belongings lay in their rightful places, food was prepared, and embers still glowed in the fire pit, yet not a single trace of the people themselves remained. Local inhabitants later recalled seeing strange, flickering lights in the night sky above the forest on the eve of their disappearance. 3 decades later, in the 1970s, a similar fate befell a group of geologists conducting research deep in the forest. One member of the expedition suddenly walked away from camp, telling his colleagues he distinctly heard children's voices calling him from the undergrowth. No one ever saw him again. Weeks of searching yielded no results, and the local shamans delivered their verdict. He had been taken by the Chulupi. Such stories, whether ancient myths or documented tragedies, continue to live in the collective consciousness, serving as a somber reminder that the jungle is not merely an ecosystem, but a self-contained world governed by forces beyond human control. The riverine arteries of the Amazon are not just life-giving currents nourishing the jungle. They are a self-contained universe, brimming with mysteries and unseen inhabitants. In the beliefs of indigenous peoples, these waters belong to special spirits who can act as both protectors and cunning temptresses. They maintain order in their domains, yet are capable of luring people into the depths or forever carrying them away into their underwater kingdom. One of the most ancient and powerful guardians of the waters is Yakumama, the great serpent, the mother of rivers. Lore tells that she dwells in the deepest pools of the Amazon, and her very breath creates gigantic whirlpools capable of swallowing even large boats. For centuries, fishermen have passed down signs of her presence from generation to generation. If the water suddenly stills and air bubbles begin to rise from its surface, then Yakumama is near. In such cases, offerings, coca leaves, a pinch of tobacco, or a few drops of the ritual drink chicha were immediately cast into the river to appease the spirit and ask for permission to fish. She has been described in various ways, sometimes as a colossal anaconda capable of capsizing a vessel with a single flick of her tail, sometimes as a spectral entity whose true form can only be glimpsed in the reflection on the water's surface. Shamans claim to have seen her in dreams and heard her voice, which would warn where the waters were too dangerous and where it was safe to fish. But not only a serpentine deity rules the river depths. The Amazonian waters are also home to other mystical creatures capable of assuming human form, the encantado, or shape-shifting dolphins. These spirits are inextricably linked to the real-life pink river dolphins, known for their intelligence and playfulness. However, in mythology, their nature is far more sinister. It is said that as night falls, the encantado come ashore, transforming into incredibly beautiful young men and women. They attend lively village festivities, where with their unearthly beauty, music and dance, they charm mortals, only to then lure them into the dark waters. And for those who succumbed to their enchantments, the river became not merely a grave, but a gateway to an underwater kingdom from which there was no return to the land. Deeply ingrained in popular belief was the conviction that an encounter with a shape-shifting dolphin, known as an encantada, irrevocably altered a human's destiny. To follow one meant almost certain doom, and the rare few who managed to return were never the same again. Shamans and keepers of ancient knowledge persistently warned, these river spirits are not only capable of seducing with their unearthly beauty, but also of fiercely punishing anyone who shows disrespect to the sacred waters. Those who polluted the rivers or mindlessly decimated their inhabitants could be struck by a terrible curse, eternal madness, or the fate of being forever bound to the Amazonian shores, unable to depart. One of the most intimate and stirring myths of this region is inextricably linked with the encantada, the legend of the boto, mysterious children whose fathers were believed to be river spirits. Throughout the Amazon, stories were passed down by word of mouth about young women who, after giving birth, could not name the earthly father of their child, and swore they had been seduced by a beautiful stranger who emerged from the water. It was believed that such children, the boto, were special beings belonging simultaneously to two worlds, the human and the spiritual. These children possessed mesmerizing looks, an innate talent for music, and at times carried subtle, strange traits that betrayed their otherworldly origins. Some versions of the legend claimed that boto could live among people, but with the coming of night, they were irresistibly drawn to the river. Yielding to this call, they would enter the water and vanish without a trace. A strict prohibition existed. If a boto child returned to the river, they were not to be sought, for the spirits tolerated no mortal interference in their affairs. Sometimes, as lore tells, the only reminder of such an event was a trail of bare footprints on the riverside mud, leading to the very edge of the water and ending abruptly there. These beliefs are alive even to this day. For many indigenous Amazonian residents, the river is not just a watercourse, but a shifting, permeable boundary between worlds where ancient entities continue to silently observe human life. Even today, when someone disappears without a trace in the jungle or the sounds of unknown music echo in the nighttime silence, locals whisper with superstitious awe, "These are the deeds of the encantada," or the great serpent Yakumama has awakened. The mythology of South America is not a static collection of archaic tales. It actively shapes the region's self-perception, creating an image of a land that still conceals unsolved mysteries. To the outside world, the Amazon basin remains the last great blank spot on the map, and the ruins in the Andes merely silent witnesses to a fallen empire. But for those born and raised here, myths are not just echoes of the past, but an integral part of the present. Despite centuries of colonial influence and the onslaught of modern culture, ancient beliefs continue to live in the hearts of the descendants of the Incas and the peoples of the Amazonian rainforest. In the deepest parts of the forests, shamans still call upon ancestral spirits, perform sacred rituals, and pass down ancient knowledge from generation to generation. For many locals, the river remains an animated being, and the forests a home for spirits demanding reverence and respect. Even in large cities, where civilization seemingly has utterly displaced old traditions, one can still hear tales of shape-shifting Zuari spirits or encounter someone who, before an important journey, still seeks blessings from the mountain peaks. However, myths don't exist solely as oral traditions. In recent decades, modern science has increasingly discovered that many ancient legends might be rooted in very real historical events or natural phenomena. The latest breakthroughs in archaeology and ecology are radically transforming previous understandings of what South America was like before the arrival of Europeans. Suddenly, the question was no longer whether there was a kernel of truth in these ancient tales, but rather what other astonishing layers of reality, long dismissed as mere folklore, still slumbered within the continent's living memory. The dawn of the 21st century marked one of the most monumental shifts in understanding ancient history, as irrefutable evidence emerged for the existence of highly developed settlements in the Amazon. For a long time, it was widely believed that the dense and hostile jungle simply could not physically serve as the cradle for large, organized civilizations. However, modern research, conducted using LiDAR laser technology that penetrates thick forest canopies, has dispelled this myth. Beneath the tree crowns, traces of complex urban agglomerations were discovered, complete with an intricate network of roads, irrigation canals, and formidable fortifications. This discovery confirmed that Amazonian peoples possessed a far more sophisticated social structure than previously thought, and their profound knowledge of land, water, and nature could have formed the basis for legends of lost cities, akin to the mythical Paititi. Equally significant confirmations of ancient rituals were found in the waters of Lake Guatavita. It is this very location that is tied to the legend of the Golden Man ceremony, which gave rise to the famous myth of Eldorado. In the 21st century, researchers, once again turning their attention to the study of the lake bed, were able to retrieve artifacts from beneath thick layers of silt that perfectly matched descriptions from ancient chronicles. The discovered gold figurines and ornaments became tangible proof that ritual sacrifices indeed took place. These findings also shed light on the true attitude of local peoples toward gold. For them, it was not a symbol of earthly wealth and power, but a sacred gift intended for the gods. Yet, the legacy of South American folklore goes far beyond mere scientific corroboration. It pulses vibrant and alive through modern culture, finding a brilliant reflection in music, cinema, literature, and spectacular festivals. Consider, for instance, the Inti Raymi festival in Cusco, which annually draws thousands of participants and countless spectators who witness a grand-scale reenactment of ancient rituals dedicated to the sun god. Across the cultural landscape of Brazil and Peru, the image of the Encantada, the mystical shape-shifting dolphin, still inspires musicians and filmmakers, while legends of forest spirits are organically woven into the narratives of popular works. Yet perhaps the most enduring element, one that persists through the ages, remains an all-encompassing sense of mystery. For all its technological triumphs and scientific breakthroughs, immense swathes of the Amazonian rainforest still lie uncharted, places where the footprint of modern humanity has yet to fall. In the high Andes, ruins of civilizations previously unknown to science are still being unearthed, and in forgotten valleys, archaeologists discover the footprints of long-vanished peoples. What other secrets does this enigmatic continent truly guard? Deep within its impenetrable heart, untold treasures might lie dormant, entire cities or fresh evidence revealing that countless myths were not mere fiction, but echoes of authentic events. The future, undoubtedly, promises breathtaking new discoveries. But for now, South America endures as a land of living legends, where the very breath of antiquity lingers in every tale, every ritual, and every secret, patiently awaiting its moment. With every such revelation, the fragile line separating myth from historical reality grows increasingly thin, prompting us to ponder, what if, one day, that line is erased forever?